Welcome to WT History. In this series, we list all the major events that happened in the world in a year, starting from 1776 to 2024. On February 21st, the Chumash Revolt broke out in Alta California. At the heart of this uprising were the Chumash people, who rebelled against the Spanish mission system. The revolt began at Mission Santa Ynez, then spread to Mission Santa Barbara and Mission La Purísima. By June 28th, after months of tension and violence, peace was finally negotiated between the Chumash leaders and the Spanish authorities. Then, on March 7th, a major announcement came from St. Augustine. The Florida Territory's capital would be relocated to Tallahassee, and by April 9th, the first permanent settlers began arriving, laying the foundation of what would become the state's enduring seat of government. Just days later, on March 11th, the United States War Department created the Bureau of Indian Affairs, a federal office that would go on to shape Native American relations and policies for generations, often with complicated and controversial outcomes. On July 10th, Gilbert du Motier, better known as the Marquis de Lafayette, set sail from Le Havre, France, aboard the ship Cadmus to return to the United States. A hero of the American Revolution, Lafayette was greeted as a living legend when he arrived in New York on August 15th. He would remain in the U.S. for over a year, receiving a hero's welcome in cities across the young nation. On November 5th, in Troy, New York, the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute was founded, the first technological university in the English-speaking world. It would go on to become a leader in science and engineering education. The United States presidential election of 1824, held on December 3rd, produced no clear winner. Andrew Jackson led with 40.5% of the popular vote, but none of the four candidates secured a majority of electoral votes. As a result, the decision went to the House of Representatives, which would not vote until February of the following year. Then, on December 24th, America's first social fraternity, Chi Phi, was founded at Princeton University, beginning a long tradition of collegiate brotherhood. And in the realm of natural science, Thomas Say provided the first formal description of the Colorado potato beetle, a pest that would later wreak havoc on American agriculture. Meanwhile, in Europe, January 8th marked a triumph for science. Michael Faraday was finally elected to the Royal Society of London, a recognition long overdue, with only one vote cast against him. On January 24th, the first issue of the Westminster Review was published. Founded by Jeremy Bentham, this radical quarterly championed reform and utilitarianism, shaking up Victorian intellectual circles. On February 20th, geologist William Buckland formally introduced the world to the name Megalosaurus, the first scientifically named non-avian dinosaur. Though rudimentary by today's standards, it marked a turning point in paleontology. Then on March 4th, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution was founded in the British Isles. Since then, this volunteer-based service has saved tens of thousands of lives at sea. On March 9th, the Netherlands Trading Society was established. A precursor to ABN AMRO, this institution was crucial in developing Dutch commerce during the colonial era. On April 7th, the Mechanics Institution was created in Manchester, part of a movement to provide education to working-class men. It later evolved into what we now know as Manchester Metropolitan University and the University of Manchester. Just days later, on April 19th, the world lost one of its greatest poets. Lord Byron died in Missolonghi, Greece, not in battle, but of fever. Ironically, it was his doctor's aggressive treatments, including bloodletting, that likely hastened his death. Byron's sacrifice turned him into a martyr for Greek independence. On April 30th, the April Revolt erupted in Portugal, when Prince Miguel turned against his liberal opponents, igniting political turmoil, despite his father, King John VI, still being on the throne. Back in Vienna, on May 7th, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, the famous choral symphony, premiered to a stunned audience. Now deaf, Beethoven had to be turned around to see the ovation he could no longer hear. On June 16th, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was established, marking the beginning of formal animal welfare in Britain. July 25th saw the opening of the Montparnasse Cemetery in Paris, which would become the final resting place of many famed writers and artists. On September 16th, Charles X ascended the throne of France after the death of his brother Louis XVIII, ushering a more conservative era in French politics. On October 10th, The Edinburgh Town Council founded the first municipal fire brigade in Britain, led by the innovative James Braidwood. Then on October 21st, Joseph Asbden patented Portland cement, a building material that would revolutionize construction worldwide. Tragedy struck St. Petersburg on November 19th with the worst flood in its history. Water levels surged over 400 centimeters, killing at least 200 people. On the global stage, January 21st marked the Battle of Nzamankau, where Ashanti Empire forces crushed British troops in modern-day Ghana, killing Governor Charles McCarthy. On February 10th, Simón Bolívar was proclaimed dictator of Peru, consolidating power to push forward the cause of South American independence. On March 17th, the Anglo-Dutch Treaty was signed, resolving colonial disputes in Southeast Asia. It would ultimately shape the modern borders of Malaysia and Indonesia. On May 24th, during the First Anglo-Burmese War, British forces took Rangoon in a surprise attack, an early step in Britain's imperial expansion into Burma. July 2nd brought upheaval to Brazil as wealthy landowners in Pernambuco launched the Confederation of the Equator, a failed secessionist movement against Emperor Pedro I. Tragedy struck Hawaii soon after. Queen Kamamalu died of measles on July 8th, followed by King Kamehameha II on July 13th. The royal couple had been visiting the United Kingdom, but never met King George IV due to their illness. On July 19th, Agustín de Iturbide, the former emperor of Mexico, returned from exile only to be executed 5 days later for violating his banishment order. On August 6th, independence fighters triumphed over Spanish forces at the Battle of Junín in Peru. A day later, the First Anglo-Ashanti War came to an end as Ashanti troops retreated from the battlefield. On September 13th, John Oxley and his crew established the Moreton Bay Penal Settlement, which would eventually become the modern city of Brisbane, Australia. On October 4th, Mexico ratified its first constitution, officially becoming the United Mexican States, a federal republic. Then, on December 9th, the Battle of Ayacucho sealed the fate of Spanish control in South America. Antonio José de Sucre's forces defeated the Spanish viceroy, ending 3 centuries of colonial rule. Finally, on December 28th, the Bathurst War in Australia ended as Chief Windradine of the Wiradjuri people peacefully surrendered at a feast in Parramatta. That same year, the name Australia was officially adopted by the British Admiralty. And in the world of science and innovation, the panoramagram, the world's first stereoscopic viewer, was invented, laying the groundwork for modern 3D imaging. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and join us next time as we journey deeper into history, 1 year at a time.